Hello and welcome to Please Me. Last week, Renee Moon, author of Her Guilty Confessions, was on the show talking about all the sexy stories she compiled for her book, which is a collection of women's fantasies from around the world. We got to hear about some of the steamy stories, and I highly recommend you go back and listen. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Eve is a licensed physical therapist who is on a mission to destigmatize conversations about sex. In her PT practice, Eve treats conditions related to sexual health. Please relax and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex by turning the sheets into our classroom. Today, I am so excited to welcome Annie Temple to the podcast. She has such an interesting story, and I can't wait to tell you all about her. She is also known as the erotic entrepreneur, a mother, a speaker, a fearless living coach, and is the #1 best-selling author of Annie Temple's Business Bible for Erotic Entrepreneurs. She has faced poverty, disability, divorce, and societal discrimination. And I am so intrigued by her and can't wait to hear her story. So without further ado, I want to welcome Annie to the podcast. Hi, Annie. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, Eve. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. I'm so excited to hear your story. You want to kind of jump in and tell us what your background is and what brought you to this place right now?
Sure. So I've been working in the adult entertainment industry for the majority of my adult life. I started out as an exotic dancer or stripper. More people know what that means. When I was 23 years old, and I'm now 50. So I have spent over half of my life in and around the adult entertainment industry. I've worked in many aspects of it, from nude modeling to stripping waitress, massage girl in the strip club. And then most recently, I got into doing content creation. I have an OnlyFans, and I also do sensual massage. And the sensual massage part of my journey has been probably one of the most interesting, eye-opening experiences and has really affected my sexual life and my sex life and even my relationship in a really positive way. So I have I have a very big appreciation for the people in my industry now, and believe that what I'm doing and what my colleagues are doing is something that's very beneficial and helpful, much like what I understand you do as a physiotherapist that helps people with sexual issues.
Absolutely. I mean, there is absolutely no shame in seeking help for sexual health. And, erotic massage is so important for people who, they don't get touched enough. And so many people are
Mhm.
so lonely and they really don't have access to that sensual touch or even, therapeutic touch, And so I think that that is incredible. And I would love to hear about your massage journey since you mentioned that it's really transformed your relationship. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. And first I'll mention how I feel really sad that so many clients of sex workers and erotic entrepreneurs are painted with such a horrible brush of being perverts or exploiting women and that kind of thing, because that is not my experience at all. I have found, like what you said, that there is there is a lack of intimacy in our society, a lack of intimacy in I would venture to say most people's lives. And even I would venture to say especially married people. And I feel that as someone who's been in long-term relationships, as well as someone who has been the dirty little secret of people who are in long-term relationships. It's really sad that, it's something that people don't talk about. And communication, of course, is the most important thing. And that was what really my communication with my clients, as well as the fact that I now had to have such clear communication with my partner when I got into this side of the industry really, really improved my communication skills in my relationship and just in general around sex, around boundaries, around empathy and compassion for what people are going through. Clients come to see me for so many different reasons. Some come to me because their wives just aren't interested in intimacy anymore. Some come to see me because they've been through some kind of health issue like prostate cancer and they're struggling to gain an erection, for instance. And so they want to practice with someone and their wives or their partners, or they don't have someone in their life that will do that with them. And then there's the people who are completely single. They work a lot or they are awkward and uncomfortable in social situations. And for whatever reason, they find it really difficult to access intimacy in their lives. And I feel like the adult entertainment industry, especially providers who provide intimacy services like sensual massage, are meeting that need. And I feel that everyone should be able to have access to intimacy. And so if people aren't accessing intimacy, then it would be really sad if we didn't have this industry to, to be there for people who are struggling. I feel like that
Absolutely.
people don't really like realize how important it is. And I also think a lot of people pretend to be very against or opposed to sex work and the sex industry, but secretly want to engage in it or secretly engage in it because their needs aren't getting met. And there's so much social pressure and stigma that people can't talk about it or be open about it, especially clients. And in Canada and many places around the world, it's illegal to be a client. So there's it's not just stigma, it's actually laws that are pushing people into places where they can't be honest. And they also push sex workers into places where they can't be safe because our clients are the people who are the most likely to come across sexual exploitation. They answer an ad, they arrive at this location, and if they see someone that who appears to be being abused or exploited or controlled in some way, they are the ones who would have the chance and the opportunity to expose that exploitation and report it and help that person. But when you criminalize clients, then they are not going to come forward because then they are jeopardizing their entire lives. They could lose their jobs, their marriages, they could lose everything. They get painted with a brush of being a pervert. And really, all they were trying to do was have a little intimacy. The biggest thing that clients love, in my experience, is just a really big, long, naked hug. I don't think that's too much to ask for.
Yes, and intimacy is so important. And so you're right. So many people are not experiencing that, even in long term relationships.
Mhm.
And there's so much stigma around sexuality that people are so afraid to talk to each other about how to get their needs met. So, absolutely, I have had many a massage where, the conversation goes into talking about relationships, my relationship, and I feel like massage therapists are doing the work of, social workers, and having these conversations with people, because people let their guards down. When they're feeling pleasure, they let their guards down. And I'm not even talking about sexual pleasure. I mean, massage in and of itself, without the genital area even being touched, is a pleasurable experience. So just having that like relaxation allows people to really open up. So I'm sure you're having lots of great conversations with your clients, and I think that this work is so, so important. You mentioned that the sex industry was always there for you. So I'm curious what you meant by that in terms of supporting you throughout your life.
Honestly, in so many ways, but the way that it has really been there the most for me is financially. When I
Yes.
was 23 years old, I was a young woman working in a big city for minimum wage. I couldn't afford to eat and pay rent. I could do one or the other. and that was about
Wow.
it. So I found myself stealing food and trying to hand out resumes everywhere and constantly looking for jobs where I could actually make enough money to support myself. And I was terribly, terribly depressed. So when I became an exotic dancer and I started stripping, and the very first night that I worked, I made more money than I did in 2 weeks at my minimum wage retail job. I was pretty excited and it was very empowering. Then, over the course of my life, I left the industry and went back multiple times. For instance, I would have babies. I went back to school. I did square jobs like a marketing manager for a nonprofit and for a motorcycle dealership and that kind of thing. But because of health issues that I've dealt with throughout my life, I haven't been able to consistently hold a job over a long period of time where I have to be there, every day, and I'm accountable for my hours and everything else. Sex work saved me in that way, because every time I was in that position of not being able to work because of my health, or because I have small children that I can't work around and can't afford daycare plus a job, sex work has always been there for me financially. And I've been able to fall back on the sex industry and the people in the industry who love me to give me jobs and to help me out. Similarly, I'm hooked in with the activism community, a big group of sex workers across Canada, well, actually around the world. But some of my local colleagues, they write grants and they get funding for all kinds of different research and stuff that the kinds of projects that help sex industry workers work in healthy and safe ways. And so whenever I've had these problems, like for instance, I was 8 months pregnant, I couldn't work, I couldn't pay my rent, I needed to get into subsidized housing. I was so overwhelmed, I didn't know what I was going to do. And a girlfriend of mine had written a grant and she'd come out with a project, and she asked me, "Will you coordinate this project?" And it was a project to increase health and safety in the sex industry. So it was something that I was passionate about, something that meant something to me, something that would help my community. And it was one of my community members who just helped me at the last minute when I needed it. Because I really, at that time, I didn't want to do in-person sex work. I was pregnant, I had children. I just, my head's not there. I didn't want to do it. It was really wonderful to have, this industry just be there for me in so many ways, but in the most, you know, important way to be able to support my family has always been the most, the one that I've felt so grateful for.
Absolutely, and you're right. I mean, minimum wage, it doesn't take you very far. I mean, you may have a job, but you're living with your parents, or have like five roommates, because it's not going to, pay the bills and allow you to be able to live your life as well. So, and so many people fall in that category where, especially if you're not able to maintain a job for a long period of time and sort of build that, you know, um, a hierarchy of like increasing your salary and
Mhm.
moving on to the next level type of thing, you're always going to be starting like at a lower level and a lower tier of salary. And as women, we already get paid less than men, right? So
Mhm.
so there are so many things that are against us when it comes to getting a job and supporting our families. And if you have kids, you know how expensive they are and how many, things they constantly need. And sometimes you're trying to figure out what to pay for. Do I pay for the rent, or do I pay for food? Like you said, I mean,
Mhm.
it can be really difficult. So yeah, having that to fall back on. And obviously you must have been good at it, because being able to go back to it over and over again, you have to have skills. Not anybody can do that type of work. So kudos to you for
Thank
finding
you.
that way to support yourself. I'd love to hear about your activism, and it gets me excited to hear people that advocate for others, especially people that, don't have a voice, like sex workers, who often are stigmatized and, are in many countries illegally working.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it started when I was going to college. Well, actually, it started before that. In about the year 2000, just after my oldest daughter was born, I was in a relationship with her father. At the time, he learned how to create a website and he taught me how to do it. And I was like, I think that exotic dancers need a website because we were constantly being lied to by agents. The agents were the ones who would hook us up with all of our gigs, so that we would phone and say, okay, I want to work this week, this week, this week. And then they would tell us, okay, I'll put you in at this one, this one, this one. This is how many shows you'll get. This is how much you'll make. This is the rules. This is what to expect. Then we would show up at these gigs and they would be completely different from what the agent said. There might not be any hot water or heat. There might be crazy rules, crazy fines, just things that we didn't expect. And we wanted to be able to, or I wanted us exotic dancers to be able to share that information with each other. So I started a website called The Naked Truth at nakedtruth.ca. And that was the beginning of, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. That was just the beginning. About 2 years later, I was in a public relations program and I was looking for an organization to volunteer with. And I found one that was for sex workers by sex workers. And it was an organization that was created and built by sex workers to help support street-based sex workers. And a lot of people, when they imagine sex workers, they imagine the person that's on the street, that's standing on a corner or whatnot, what you usually see in movies, etc. But scientists or people who've studied this, researchers, I should say, have estimated that the street-based sex worker population is about 15% of the entire population of sex workers who are providing intimacy. And then there's even the bigger group of exotic dancers, adult film, dominatrix, et cetera, et cetera. We could go on and on and on. But that group, they were called Pace Society. They were sex workers for sex workers. I wanted to volunteer with them because they reminded me of my website, which was by strippers for strippers. So I thought, this is perfect. And when I met the women who were a part of that organization, they brought me into their fold and they began to mentor me. And I found out that there is an actually extremely well-organized, well-connected network of sex workers around the world who are incredibly intelligent and productive and making amazing strides in helping sex workers to live healthier, safer lives. So that was like the introduction to me when they kind of brought me in to their kind of little club. I don't know what to call it, like a network of amazing people that I admire. And so then they brought me in there and I started doing fundraising events for their organization. That was my volunteer work. And my fundraising events were strip-a-thon fundraisers. So I would get all of my exotic dancer friends together and we would throw these huge events, like crazy huge events with strippers donating their shows, and we'd take the money from the door and we'd have silent auction and all kinds of different things. And then we'd give that money to a cancer organization. But we kept running into problems finding cancer organizations that would accept our donation. And then one year, finally was fed up after an organization had accepted our donation the year before, but then not the next year. And I sent out a press release asking who will take our donation. And
Okay,
then that
interesting.
was crazy. Oh my
The
gosh.
floodgates opened.
It was like overnight, like people, the general public were outraged that an organization wouldn't take our donation. And we were shocked because we'd had lots of organizations turn us down and we were used to the discrimination. So when newspapers started getting letters to the editor, just like we had whole pages dedicated in local newspapers with letters to the editor of people supporting us. And it was just incredible. So that was kind of my beginning of being a spokesperson in the news and that kind of thing, and getting into media work. And then I just kept going. And I did more research projects. I coordinated a project called Trade Secrets, and that is available at nakedtruth.ca. And it is basically a guide for people in the adult entertainment industry of how to work safely and healthy. And it even offers information on how to be seductive, how to make more money, lots of safety stuff. But also, we feel that to be healthy and safe, you need to also be able to live financially stably. And, so it's just an incredible resource. And that experience, plus all these years of activism and working in the sex industry, ultimately led to me writing my book that became a bestseller last year, The Business Bible for Erotic Entrepreneurs. So it's been just crazy.
That is
Crazy
so
journey.
incredible. A #1 bestseller. And you know what? The sex industry supported you there too, because I bet you all of the people that are reading your book, or a lot of them, and I'm sure plenty of people, that are not in the adult industry are reading it too, to get those tips and tricks, because we all want to be able to dance sexy for our partners, right? Whether it be in the bedroom, solo with, just your partner, or, on the dance floor or whatever. So I think it's an incredible book. I mean, I'm definitely I'm going to have to go get it myself. It's one of those that I'm like, okay, I think I can gain some knowledge from this one.
Do you want to hear a funny story?
Yes.
So I'm, guerrilla activism. I love this idea of coming up with ideas of how to reach people that have an influence or an impact on the lives of sex workers. And in Canada right now, we have a liberal government, which is very left, obviously, but we have a conservative government that is really high in the polls. And it looks like there's a very good chance that we're going to have a conservative government come into power at our next election, which we don't know when that will be, because there's people trying to pull our prime minister out of his position right now. So who knows? But I don't really consider myself left, right. I'm more of an anarchist. I believe in voluntarism. I think we should all work to take care of our communities and all take responsibility for each other and, the world that we live in, instead of depending on public servants, especially public servants that we a lot of the time can't necessarily trust, which comes out over and over in the news. But last night, the conservative up and comer was local to my neighborhood, and conservatives have never listened to sex workers. They never have. And there is a fear in my community right now about what's going to happen when the conservatives come into government. So I registered for this conservative event, which normally I wouldn't even want people to find out I went there, because most of the people in my community would be just so shocked and, angry, even, because people get so emotional about politics. But I went there because I wanted to plant a seed and see if there was any chance that I could get near enough to give him my business Bible. So
Okay.
I managed to get near enough that I caught his eye, and he kind of smiled and waved, and his handler came over to talk to me. And I said, please make sure that, this politician gets my business Bible. And I wrote a little note in it asking him to please listen to sex workers and to reach out and give our community a chance to just open the lines of communication with the conservatives. So I don't really have a lot of hope for it, but I just get excited when I push myself into those really uncomfortable situations like that. And I think, this is the kind of thing that uh, you don't imagine when you think of an activist. You think of people like, there were activists at this event on
Right.
the left side who were trying to disrupt the conservative rally. And so, that's kind of what you imagine. You imagine people with signs, you imagine people, yelling and trying to disrupt. But I was just trying to secretly under the radar, just plant a seed so that maybe we could open some lines of communication, because whatever government we have it has an influence and an impact on our lives. And it's very frightening. Where I live, in British Columbia, Canada, our police don't enforce most of the sex work laws against clients unless one of us makes a complaint or something like that. And so, for the most part, people who engage in our industry aren't criminalized. We're criminalized in theory, but not in practice so much. But in a lot of other places across Canada, the laws against purchasing sex services are a real problem, and they impact sex workers and clients alike in really, really negative ways. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot on our plate. The activists have a lot to do.
And I applaud you for doing something so brave like that, because it takes a lot of courage to get in the middle of a group of people that don't agree with who you are as a human being for the most part, and getting yourself right in there, and also drawing their eye and having someone come over and getting that book to them. I mean, that is awesome. And if nothing else, it's going to be passed around.
I hope so.
I definitely think it's going to be passed around, and I hope you hear from them. I really do, because what you're doing is so important to keeping people safe. Tell me what other life lessons you've learned from being part of the sex industry.
Well, one is about monogamy.
Okay.
I was so nervous when I started doing sensual massage that my partner wouldn't be okay with it. I asked him first, and he said to me, I think I'd be okay. I think I'd be fine with it. But we didn't really know until I did my first massage. And then he was like,
Right.
no, I'm not jealous. I'm okay. Okay. So then we moved forward. Knowing that I could have these intimate experiences with other people and enjoy them, and even develop loving, caring, nurturing feelings towards these people, but also recognizing that it did not detract in any way, shape, or form from the love I have for my partner. It didn't make me feel less attracted to him. It didn't make my eye wander, like, it didn't make me want to leave the relationship or pursue another relationship. It didn't, in any way detract from what I have with my partner. And recognizing that and realizing that was, it was a big step for me, because it allowed me to give him the same degree of respect and understanding. And when I started to, really enjoy my job, I actually started to feel a little guilty. So I encouraged my partner to go and see a provider himself. And so then for a little while, that was kind of a fun thing that we did. We would see providers together or apart, and it would always, like, just, turn up the heat in the relationship, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
It's so
Absolutely.
funny.
Especially if you're doing it together or even apart. I mean,
Yes,
you,
even
then
apart. Like,
you get a sexy massage, then you come home ready for play. And, I mean, it will, get the juices flowing for sure.
absolutely. And I feel like sometimes my clients will talk about how their wives have lost interest in sex. And I wonder, have they really lost interest in sex, or are they just tired of doing it with the same person? And it's not to insult that person, but it becomes just so familiar. It's the same. There's no excitement. The feeling of someone that is a stranger or not your familiar partner touching you, it's more exciting. It's more more sensation you feel. There's more just excitement because it's different and it's someone different. And I think that you get all those excited hormones going, and then you come back to your partner and you're all excited and now you have a fresh perspective towards your partner as well. And I often would say to my clients, and have said and have thought and not said, that, if the wives would go get a sensual massage, they might come home and want more intimacy more often. But women are so much less likely, I find, to really make sure that their intimacy needs are being met. Men are more likely to prioritize it, I feel. And I think that's
Absolutely.
unfortunate. It's kind of unfortunate.
It is. And they're much more likely, men are much more likely to pay for sexual health, treatments than women are.
Mm.
They won't question, putting down their card to get erectile dysfunction treatment. But on the other side of the coin, women have the same condition. It's not called erectile
Yeah.
dysfunction, it's called decreased vaginal sensitivity and dryness, but it's caused by the exact same thing, decreased blood flow. And I don't get as many clients, women clients, as men, because when they hear how much it costs, they can think of other things that they would rather prioritize with their money instead of putting their sexual health at the top of that list.
Mhm.
And sexual health is so important. I mean, it brings us joy, it brings us happiness. Why are we prioritizing other stuff before our sexual health, and so I really always encourage everybody to look at that. And you talked about being more of an anarchist, and I always say that I'm a relationship anarchist, and I like to
Mm.
throw away all of those preconceived notions about relationships out the window, and really create the relationship that you want to live yourself. And you just talked about that with starting your massage practice and incorporating sensual massage, and how you had to really tease out those conversations with your partner, to make sure that everybody was okay. But once everybody's okay and you have the green light, you can move into whatever, you know, idea you want, But
Mhm.
the point is that communication must happen in order for you to move forward, because you want to keep that ethical relationship going, right? And so I am a big believer in modern relationships, right? Modern meaning, open-minded relationships where, anything can go as long as you're communicating with your partner and they're in agreement with what you both decide, and
Mhm.
it might be that you want to open the relationship up to another partner or two, and as long as everybody's on board, who's to say that we can't form relationships that are different from, the monogamous relationships that society tells us we are supposed to be in. And, monogamy is a construct, it's a societal construct. And if you look at the timeline, they did I don't know if you watch this or not, but I found it really interesting. On Netflix, there's a show called Explained, and um, one of the seasons episodes is about monogamy, and how it's a blip in the history of society or of humanity where monogamy has existed. It's a created construct of our society, and really humans suck at it. We suck
Yes.
at being monogamous. That's why so many people cheat, because we are
Mhm.
not good at conversating, having these conversations, and agreeing to different things outside of what society tells us we should and shouldn't be doing. And so people are cheating when really, if only you just had a conversation with your partner might be okay with you, having your, occasional fling, if they're not the ones that want to be providing that, for you. So, communication, I always say, is like so,
Mhm.
so important in relationships.
I agree. And I also feel like the whole monogamy culture, it creates this idea where we have ownership over another person. And when you own them, you feel entitled, you feel offended really easy, you feel like the absolute worst betrayal in the world is infidelity. And it will actually destroy you. It will destroy, I've seen it destroy people. And I've been through it when I was younger where it was devastating, just devastating. And it's all because of how we've been taught to think about it. It has nothing to do with reality. It's all about what we've been taught to think. And we've created a society of jealous people and people who feel like they have a right to look in each other's phone and have a right to, control each other's behavior. And I feel like that is very caused by monogamy culture. And the thing is an open relationship or a ethical non-monogamy or anything like that. It's like you said, it's actually just like monogamy. If we were to break monogamy down into what it really simply is, which is just an agreement to only have sex with each other. If we were to just simply say that's what monogamy is, then all the other ways are exactly the same. They're just a consensual agreement that you make with each other. And when you look at it like that, then you can be pissed off if someone breaks that agreement, because you can say, well, hey, we had this agreement and you broke it. Maybe we need to talk about this agreement and it's not working for you, but I would have preferred you talk to me about it in advance, you know? But it's just not the society we live in. We can't talk about these things. When I sat down with my boyfriend and said, this was earlier on in our relationship, and he was jealous about a guy friend that I was hanging out with. And so we went for lunch and I said, I would like to think that if you were attracted to someone and you strongly enough that you would even consider jeopardizing our relationship and potentially cheating on me, then instead of doing that, you would come to me and we would talk about it. And we could decide, well, maybe I let you go see what that's like and see how you feel about it. Or maybe we decide to take a break, or maybe we decide to have an open relationship for a while, or whatever decision we come to, that we would come to it respectfully together. And that's something that I can do now and I feel confident doing now. And a lot of that comes from working in the sex industry, but also from breaking apart and breaking down these ideas about monogamy that I feel like everyone's brainwashed to believe, but they don't actually serve us in a positive way. And I agree with you. Like, I feel like the reason that monogamy fails and is such a failure is because it's actually, the culture of monogamy breaks down communication instead of building it up. Because when everyone has the same idea that you've been raised with, and you're forced into that way of living even though you don't want to be, then it's obviously going to fail. And my partner, when I told him, when he started seeing providers and whatnot with my blessing, and we started kind of experimenting a little bit more in our relationship, I remember after a few months of this, or I remember saying to him, so do you feel like going to see a provider, or try for your birthday or something like that? And he said, honestly, I don't. And that's okay too, because the relationship can go like this and it can go like this. And as long as there's communication, you can make it through all those different. And then for a long time now, neither of us has gone to see providers, because we just kind of, that's not our thing now. But I'm not going to say we'll never do it again, because maybe we will. And that's just something that we can talk about now, because we were open and honest enough and non-jealous and loving enough to be able to have those conversations, and recognizing that I don't own him and he doesn't own me, and that if somebody did come into his life that he fell in love with, like, because isn't that the biggest fear? Everyone's biggest fear when it comes to infidelity or open relationships, everyone's biggest fear is that their partner is going to leave them for someone else. But if you truly love someone and they want to be with someone else, then don't you want that for them? And if you don't, then do you really love them? You know what I mean? So like I like, all of these things come to me now, and whenever I start to feel myself getting a little bit jealous, or a little, and I think we all do, but or a little bit like, insecure, then I remind myself, you know what? If my partner does meet someone, or did find someone, or didn't want to be with me anymore, I'm not gonna be angry at him. I'm going to let go with love. I want him to be happy. I love him, you know? So, and he's my best friend. Well, I wouldn't want to like be the person that's holding him back from happiness. I feel like our relationship, most people in relationships don't even think like that. All they think about is you're mine and I own you and how dare you treat me this way, et cetera, et cetera. So,
And you're right. I mean, that does breed terrible communication because, you know, if you are always worried about your partner flirting with someone else or, you know, doing more than flirting, you
mm-hmm.
know, you're going to, you know, always be with that jealous mindset, which is going to make your partner not want to tell you anything, you know? And so the
Mm-hmm.
communication is going to be not so good. And guess what? When you don't have communication, you're not going to get your needs met, no matter what, you know? And doesn't matter if you're married or not. Any relationship can fall apart by someone else coming into the picture and, you know, your partner falling in love with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Any relationship that can happen, whether you've been with someone for a month or you've been married to them for, you know, 30 years or more, you know, I mean, no matter what, that can certainly happen. You know, we have this idea of marriage as being like permanent, like once you've done
Mm-hmm.
it, this is it forever. And yes, you know, obviously you take the vow till death do us part. But in reality, right, 50% of marriages end in divorce. And this was a statistic that I didn't know about before, but that statistic goes up with marriages. So the second marriage, it's like 80%, or I can't remember exactly what it was. That's fact
Wow.
check me on that, listeners. But definitely it goes up. So 50% on your first marriage, second marriage, even higher, third marriage, even higher. So it's like, hello, can't we see that what we've created is not working for us? You know,
Mm-hmm.
it is not working. And I can tell you right now that the big basis of that is communication, because people are afraid to talk about sex and afraid to talk about intimacy. And if only they could have these kind of conversations, they would be much better off.
I agree with you. I feel like I've been a really special uh situation when I offer my massages because I've got a minimum of 1 hour, possibly more, and I'm gonna start my client on their stomach and massage their legs and their back and their ass, and you know they're going to have a very long, drawn out, relaxing, exciting, you know, titillating experience that kind of goes from I'm getting relaxed, I'm getting turned on, I'm getting relaxed, I'm getting turned on until and then there's the skin contact and the conversation, like you said, because people open up when they're exposed. I don't know why it happens exactly how it does, but when I can be open and I give them a safe space to be open, people are more vulnerable when they're in these kinds of situations. And so they share I've so many times had clients say to me, I can't believe I'm telling you this. I've never told anyone this. And I'm a great secret keeper. You know, I know lots of secrets. Like I was listening to one of your previous podcasts about there was a subject of how some people will have a kink and they'll go outside the relationship because their partner doesn't like that kink or isn't into that kink. Like, for instance, a wife that doesn't like anal sex and a husband who really wants to do it, or whatever the kink is. And in the sex industry, a lot of clients are people with kinks that they can't express them within their relationships, and so they go to providers. And the most fascinating thing I think for me about my married clients is the majority of them are drop dead in love with their wives. They are so in love with their wives. Their wives are their best friend. They don't want to divorce them. They don't want to leave them. They don't want to have an affair. They don't want to be with anyone else. They consider seeing a provider as like going to see any other type of specialist, like a physiotherapist, someone who can meet the needs that they need to be met, and they pay for it, and it's not cheating it because they're not going to leave their wife for this person. There's no emotions involved. And yeah, relationship is developed between the client and the provider, because you can't be in intimate situations like that without there being a relationship or feelings that are developed. But they're not romantic, I want to marry you, I want to be with you for the rest of my life type of feelings. They're more feelings along the lines of a mutual respect and a mutual kindness, and a mutual interest in hoping that the other person's life is going well. And it's more like a special friendship. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and that's another thing that I just thought of is how in most like square world type of client provider or service provider relationships, we're told you can't have intimacy, you can't have a personal relationship or any kind of personal connection because it's unprofessional. But in my business, that is the profession. The profession is to have those personal and intimate relationships. And so I know for a fact that it is possible to have professional personal relationships, and that this idea that is perpetuated in our society that that's not possible or not professional is, in my opinion, completely wrong. So I just feel like that's what's missing the most in our lives, is that intimacy and connection, and especially now with the internet. I mean, what I love about the internet is what we're doing right now, face to face conversation, communication, but the internet largely is used for us to just be in ourselves and in our own worlds and disconnected from everyone around us. And I think that our world needs people like me and you to really, like, encourage that communication and encourage people to have that intimacy. Like I learned in my business that the best way to start an intimate little fun time with my honey is to set an hour aside. Turn on some mood music and mood lighting. Put on some lingerie. Make sure the TV's been off for a while. It's don't turn over while the TV's on and say, "Hey, what do you feel?" I mean, it happens, right? But like the thing that people don't invest in is that the time and the energy that it takes to really connect with your partner. And it takes one person in the relationship, if not both, to make sure that that's happening. And so I've been that person because that's my work, and I realize and recognize on a continuous basis how important it is. So I come home and I say, okay, we haven't connected. We really need to. This is important, and I don't want us to grow apart. So, that's not happening in most relationships,
I
unfortunately.
agree. I agree. And, that's why people seek massages and other sorts of things.
Mhm.
Like you mentioned, um, seeking kinks that, your wife doesn't want to do with you. And then what do you do? Do you resent
Mhm.
them forever? Or do you find somebody that can, help you with that need, right? And create a mutually beneficial relationship with that other person that you're paying, to do XYZ with, and so I applaud people for doing that work, and I know that it's difficult because of the stigma associated with it. But I do feel like we need to break those stigmas down because this is important work, and people need intimacy and people need pleasure. I mean, our bodies were wired for pleasure head to toe. So if we are ignoring our pleasure, we are not living fulfilling lives, in my opinion. I could
Mhm.
be, you may disagree with me, but in my
Yeah.
opinion, we all need pleasure and we all need love. And so seeking that outside of your relationship when it's something, that your partner is not interested in, I think is a good healthy way of getting those needs met.
Mhm.
However, I do feel like people should be having conversations about
Yes,
that, you know what
I
I
agree.
mean? And because I know that many of the people that come to see these type of workers are not telling their wives, I want you to I want you to use a strap on me and I know that you don't want to, so I'm gonna go, meet, dominatrix vixen, to
Mhm.
get my needs met. I doubt if they're having those conversations,
Mhm.
and I think that they should. They should, just because if they really love their wife so much, they should be able to have that conversation. And I think that that is coming. I think it's going to take years and years before we get to the point where, we're having enough of these conversations where it becomes more mainstream to have conversations about sex, but I do think it's coming. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm hopeful that it is, for sure.
Yeah, me too. And I think that the whole view that the sex industry and sex workers are, home wreckers and that kind of thing, we really need to rewrite that script and recognize that, uh, you know, they can be a beneficial part of your relationship. So wives can instead of feeling angry about their partner saying they want to go see a sex worker, they could feel relieved or whatever it is, or maybe they could feel like, oh, well, maybe now I have permission and I could go see a sex worker. And me personally, like,
That's
I
right.
think sex workers are a great option for people in relationships that don't want necessarily to bring in potentially hurt feelings if you have a relationship, with someone who's not a sex worker, your friend or your person from work or whoever, they might develop feelings and try to interfere in the relationship. And there's so many things that I wouldn't want personally to have to deal with. So for me and my relationship, seeing a provider if we're going to go outside the relationship works for us. And I feel like that's, that should be an option for couples. Like that should be something that maybe marriage counselors should promote. But instead, we have like this really stigmatized industry, which is unfortunate.
Yes, I agree. But I do think it's changing, with these conversations, these
Mhm.
type of podcasts, the work that you're doing, the community that you're involved with. I think that over time it will change and things will get better. So let's talk about the whore stigma, what it is and how it impacts sex workers. And I want to talk about also the word whore and how I feel like it's really changing in our society. And I just
Mhm.
actually had um, Demi Wild on the show, and he talked about the LGBTQ community and taking the word queer back, right? And making it something positive instead of negative. And I feel the same goes with the word whore and slut, and how a lot of women are embracing those words and saying, yeah, I'm a whore. Yeah, I'm a slut. I do like sex. What about it? You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so I'm just curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Sure. So the horror stigma is basically the idea that the lowest common denominator of a woman is a whore, and that no woman ever wants to be called a whore, considered a whore, looked at as a whore. Slut is on the same kind of in the same area, but whore is even like whore is the worst you can be. And so in society, especially like as girls growing up, you get called a slut or a whore at school or a reputation, and it can really destroy you. It can devastate you, and it can affect your whole life and how people treat you in and around your friend groups, especially with young people, because young people are so immature. But then as you get older, it becomes about, the whore is the home wrecker, the whore is so and whores are people who take money for sex. That's pretty much what the definition is, or, whore is someone who exchanges sex for money. So if a person who exchanges sex for money is the lowest common denominator and the lowest of the low, then nobody wants to be that. So that's the whore stigma. And then the whore stigma actually even extends into the adult entertainment industry where say an exotic dancer or a stripper is like, I'm not a whore. I don't have sex with my clients. I only dance with them. Or a dominatrix is like, I'm not a whore. I don't have sex with my clients. I stick dildos up their asses. Or I'm an adult film performer. I don't have sex with clients. I have sex on film, but I'm not a whore. And so there's this hierarchy. And then even within the different areas of the sex industry, there's like, the whorearchy, we call it.
I love
So we
that.
have, yeah, we have a hierarchy of whoredom. But yeah, certainly the word is being taken back. I have a lot of friends who are not in the industry, and whenever I use the word casually, it obviously doesn't bother me. I call myself a proud whore. I have no problem with the word. Excuse me. But whenever I say it in front of my friends who aren't in the industry, they'll get looks on their faces like, "Don't call yourself that. Oh, please don't say that." And it's like I almost feel offended that they're having that kind of reaction, because I'm like, I am a whore, and you acting like that is like, it's bad. I don't know. Anyway, it just
Not accepting of who you are, and if they
Mhm.
truly knew you, they would know that that is a word that you embrace. But
Yeah.
again,
But
if
it's
you've never
their
had
own,
that
yeah,
conversation, yeah, it's their own like mental thought,
socialization.
exactly, of
Hmm.
what they feel. And words are powerful, and we give them a lot more power, by our associations,
Yes.
and what is offensive to one may be great to another. Like, you call yourself a whore and you're completely fine with it. I
Hmm.
personally don't like to refer to myself as a slut, a whore, a bitch, or any
Hmm.
of those like negative terms, because I just don't feel like that's how I feel about my sexuality. To
Hmm.
me, sexuality is more spiritual, and
Hmm.
so I prefer goddess.
Oh yeah. I like
I
goddess
prefer,
too.
yeah, I prefer, sex goddess or something like that, because to me, it
Hmm.
just has that connotation of like spirituality, because I do think that sex was one of the greatest gifts that, our, quote unquote God, whoever that is to people, everybody has their own views of spirituality, but their higher
Hmm.
power is, it was created for a reason, and none of us would exist on this planet without sex, right?
Hmm.
So there's no shame in sex, and so I personally like to link it with my spiritual practices, but
Yes.
that's me,
Hey, I
so
call myself a massage goddess because I think
there you go.
massage girl sounds like I'm young. I'm like, no, I'm too old for the term girl. I'm a goddess.
Yes, yes, and
But
if
I
you're
think
doing
when,
it right, you are
yeah,
a goddess.
I think when people in my community and when we use the term horror, we're using it in like in the mind frame of it being a word that puts us all into the same club kind of thing. We're all part of this society of whores. I don't know, but so I don't know. Like, one of the first books that I ever read that really opened my eyes and helped me to accept myself and not internalize that kind of oppression of the whore stigma was a book called Whores and Other Feminists. And I loved that
Hmm.
they could, use the word in a sentence or phrase as like, these are people, these are feminists, these are humans, and what their job is, people can call it being a whore. And it has negative connotations to most people, but if you love your work and you're proud of it and you have lots of friends who are also whores, then it becomes just a name of, your club, your group, your industry. And it's a slang term, like, obviously I call myself an erotic entrepreneur or a sensual masseuse or a massage goddess. But the word whore is more when I'm just like talking with my friends, and it's just like the comfortable slang word to use about our community. Kind of
Yeah,
like, when
absolutely.
the Black community use the N word and they're totally comfortable, it rolls off their tongue like nothing. And then if I or someone, were to use that word, it would sound really awkward and it's inappropriate. But
Completely.
so, like, and
And
that's
that's
the
what I
same.
taught. That is
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about, like taking that language back and making it
Mhm.
your own, because then, you can kind of change the connotation and really give it more meaning, more life. Because if
Mhm.
horror is only one thing to you and you can describe it in one sentence, there's just so many more nuances to everything that we say.
Yeah.
So, creating that narrative, creating that definition for ourselves, I think really is helpful to expand everybody's mind. So
Mhm.
I like to ask this question, and we've been going on and on. This is the longest interview, and I am so happy because you are just so much fun to talk to. But we have been going for over an hour already. So I am going to ask my last question, which I ask to all of my guests. What is your favorite sex position?
Oh, there's so many to choose from. That's really hard. Let me think. I mean, for a long time, when someone asked me that question, I would say on top because that is the easiest way for me to have an orgasm during penetration because I can kind of like get exactly the kind of friction I need on my clitoris. So I do love that position, but I also really love uh missionary. And the reason I love missionary is because you can see your partner's face and there's just so you can do eye gazing, you can do dirty talking. There's just so much and you're it's to me it's the most intimate position because you're embraced. And I don't know, I love that position. But then I also love the position, where you're like lying on your side and they're behind you, and then you got like their stubble on your neck and they're like, spooning you. I love that position too. I could probably come up with many more, but I'll stop there.
All right, so we got the top three of Annie Temple's. Wait, did I say that name right? No. Did I
Mhm.
say that right? Yes, I did. I'm sorry. We got the top three of Annie Temple's favorite sex positions. So there you go. And all of those positions have come up in the past. And I'm always surprised by people saying missionary, not necessarily because I know that it is really great for intimacy, for eye gazing, for connection. It creates the most connection out of all positions. So I totally agree. Um, I'm with you with the writing. I'm definitely with you with the writing. I love that. And that spoon position is like my lazy go to. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like working too much, but I feel like, getting it on. That is a great position when you're feeling lazy. So all
Totally.
three are amazing. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. This has been such a fun conversation, and I definitely feel like we're going to have another part two because, we probably could talk on and on and on for hours. So I want to just make sure that my listeners can find you. Can you tell me where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at annietemple.com. And I would love to come back on your show anytime. I think we could probably get a lot more down and dirty next time.
Oh, yes, definitely. I am all for that. That sounds like a lot of fun. As a licensed physical therapist treating sexual health conditions, I find that my clients are often ashamed or embarrassed about sexual health conversations. There is no shame in seeking help for your sexual health. Reach out to me if you need help with treatment for vaginal dryness, decreased sensitivity, and erectile dysfunction, as well as pelvic floor conditions. I also do health coaching, so don't be shy and say hi. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok for more information on my next podcast. And if you love the podcast, please leave me a 5-star review on Apple. Don't forget to like and comment. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you so much, Annie, for being on the show.
Thank you. Can't wait to do it again.
Yay, definitely. Until next time. Visit pleaseme.online to reach Eve or for more information on products to increase blood flow and overall health, for her curated list of her favorite toys, and for swag that shows that you are a big fan. Please consider supporting the show.